In this next chapter, Harrie talks about some of the more spectacular healing cases that she had done, and many of these she had recorded in her diaries, which helps her to make a more vivid recollection of what happened. The first story is about a girl with what is now called multiple personality disorder. Back then, it was called a form of obsession. As she describes how she puts her hands on patients, you may notice that there are many parallels in modern healing practices that people do accept, such as Reiki. But what I find really notable is that she developed these techniques long before Reiki was talked about. And she sees it as an extension of God's power that is available to anyone if we can learn to access it. The one thing that you will find yourself asking is, how could any of this be true? Harrie's experiences feel hard to believe, and she in fact talks about it and mentions how do things like hypnotism actually work. If you're curious and want to take a look at modern variants of the energy-based healing that are becoming rather mainstream at this point, just because they've helped many people, the closest would be to look at videos on Reiki training or topics such as Eileen McCusack's vibrational healing or some of the theories behind Qigong. While Harrie's work is connected to her faith and experiences, the modern explanations talk more in terms of harmonics or bioelectric currents that run in the body. This bioelectricity is probably one of the latest fields that is suddenly being accepted in standard medical research. So let's start with chapter 4, Healing in Action. As I discovered that I could channel healing power to restore others to heal, I learned that there was much more that came with this heightened understanding of reality. These other insights all telescope together, but for the sake of clarity of this report, I will cover these by topic. So she's not going to work in chronological order anymore. At first, I discovered the healing. It began to understand a little about the process, probably a great deal of the world's knowledge of healing and of materia medica came first, the empirical experience, that is, by observation of what actually works. But I expect there was something that could be called psychic on how these priests or healers initially tried some of these more successful methods. When I first began to do healing, I did not know what to do. I placed my hands on a patient's head and then slowly ran my hands along the body. When I reached the ailing part, my hands stopped and the power just poured in. Sometimes wind blew from above me and I felt a stream of power from my head to my feet. It ran down my arms and hands. Later, I was able to, she has in quotes, see the diseased portion and was often able to realize what caused the illness. In special cases, I seemed enveloped in a cloud of light, and then the power flows from my whole body. Sometimes several persons have placed their hands on my knees and sides, helped receive the energy, and it would channel through me to strengthen what I was using to treat the other person. To me, the power feels like an electric current, a breeze of soft air, hot or cold as required by the condition. Sometimes the patient feels the same thing. The power is always with me, although I do not think of it all the time. People have claimed that they were healed by being near me, although the fact was actually unknown to me. Sometimes when a patient comes into a room and we begin to talk, I have a quick intuition as to what the patient's real difficulty is, physical, mental, or spiritual. Some physicians, I'm sure, have much the same intuition for the physical diagnosis, although mine is apt to come as a sharp vision of a diseased organ or of an opaque spot in the body. Sometimes a teacher appears and instructs me as to what to do with the patients or what exactly I am to do. Sometimes I have an indication of what the patient should eat or should not eat, or what minerals are lacking in his body chemistry. Obviously, I do not prescribe medicine, although I sometimes send a patient to a doctor when I know medicine would be of aid to him. After all, the body is a physical organism, and may have the need of a chemical aid through food or medicine, as well as the need of the kind of help an osteopathic physician can give, or a physical therapist, or a hydrotherapist. Psychic healing is just another way of getting the body forces in balance. The charge which comes through me is spiritual and also electromagnetic in character. It recharges the nucleus of the cells so that they become their own functioning batteries again, which affects the endocrine balance and restores health to the organs. Treating does not tire me, as there is always enough power available for me. However, if I have too much sympathy for people, it takes my own strength, and it seems as though the healer's best attitude is one of a relaxed but single-pointed and impersonal approach. That is, the healer needs to be entirely intent on being empty and ready for the power without any self-interest, and also without any anxiety for the patient. The treatment comes from God. The power flows from Him. The creative forces are His restorative forces. To become over-anxious or involved in sympathy makes me intrude as a third person, so to speak, and then I begin to give my own strength. And that is not what the patient needs. The difficult thing really is to learn how to have abounding impersonal love. But I think it is a state necessary to other spirituals' attainment besides healing. Perhaps at best, a healer approximates the pure state only occasionally, and sometimes I wonder that God can use limited instruments as skillfully as He does. There's a great difference in the patient's ability to call forth healing. Those who are deeply religious, even though they do not know that they are religious, are the easiest to heal. What do I mean by religious in this sense? It is a quality compounded of humility, expectancy, and unselfishness. Such persons may have no special church training and no particular creed, but their souls respond to love and give out love. Often they are particularly gifted in dealing with children and with old people. There is something in the saying about people's having a natural way with children, old people, and dogs. Children, old people, and dogs can seldom render a return service. So to service to them is just loving offer of a hand for the sake of helping. It is such unself-centered persons who are the easiest to heal. But people who are hidebound about religious forms, I had to look up hidebound. It means stubbornly narrow-minded or inflexible about how things should happen. Okay, back to the story. And those people who are bound to the letter of the law do not respond so quickly to healing. They aren't fluid. They seem stiff and brittle. The more dogmatic they are, the harder to break that outer shell and find the Christian within them. One of the early cases recorded in my notebooks is of a girl named Susie, who had been confined to a mental asylum for 16 years. Susie's father and mother wanted me to go to the asylum, which was in another city, to see what could be done for her. They were to pay my expenses and make the arrangements for me to see her. I went to the train depot at the appointed time, but was handed a letter from Susie's father saying that he had given up the whole plan. We can say that his common sense reasserted itself, or that his uncommon self, called faith, failed him. I sat down and I prayed for guidance. My father answered almost immediately. I presume that on all planes, God often uses individuals to convey His message. So my father advised me to go on as I had been told and to pay no attention to what anybody else said. Just trust and obey the direction that I'm given. This is from my diary in July 23rd in 1910. As I sat on the train reading, this came to me with great force, and I sent it mentally to Susie. You dear girl, I am coming to see you. Spirit is strong and beautiful, and will recognize mine when I speak to you. We are sisters, and this influence which has controlled you must give way before the power which I bring you. So that's the end of the message. It is a wonder that I knew that she was obsessed, because I had never heard of obsession except in the Bible stories, before that time. So Harrie continues. My father wrote through my pencil, "My child, you need not worry at all. Only do as you are led. We are with you, for this day's work will do much good, not only to the others, but to yourself." These quotes from the automatic writing that come through her father sometimes come in a more formal language, which is why she mentions that sometimes God uses her father as a messenger. These sound to me kind of like a pep talk for her. I mean, think about it. You're just going to an asylum to visit back then. That was a terrifying experience. To travel to heal someone, that would be even more so. And then you add the question of, should she go ahead and attempt to help this teenager or not, and pay for the trip herself? These words from her father confirmed that she was doing the right thing and to have faith. So we're going to go back and now hear what he had written through her hand. Serve the Lord with gladness and enter his courts with praise. Go before him with joy and make plain his path for those who are coming. No evil thing can come nigh thee, and thou shalt be his servant, even though the servant of the Most High God. Even in that place of misery and pain, among untold heartache and countless obsessions, he is with thee, and thou shalt see the glory of God and his wonderful power. Thou art his handmaiden. Trust his power to bring light into darkness and sunshine and joy into those who sorrow. His hand is not weakened, neither his arm shortened, that it cannot save. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path, and he shall give thee power from on high. Okay, so normally when we'll see later, when messages come from her father, it's in much more conversant tone. So this is obviously passing through him from somewhere else, where they talk in a more biblical way, or that was just the way that she got the message to make sure she knew that it was important. So the next day, on July 24th, in Harrie's notes, she starts again. The nurse took me to Susie's room and shut me in with a number of harmless patients. Susie had a vacant look and laughed a great deal. For more than a year, she had not recognized her father, nor did she appear to have any memory of her home or of her family. She sat and she looked at me and said, "You are a stranger." I told her that I knew her father and mother, but she seemed not to hear me. She just laughed and muttered. Suddenly, she sat up very straight and said, "What kind of doctor are you? You are a different kind." And then she told me that she had a pain in her side, and I laid my hand on it while she sat and watched my face for some time. Suddenly, her eyes grew intelligent and bright, and her face flushed a little bit, and she said, "That feels better." And then she spoke sensibly about her father and her mother. She grew sleepy and lay down on her bed, and I treated her for a long time. When she wakened, she remained sensible and laughed only twice when some other patients came into the room and laughed at her. And she asked me, "Why don't you make them go away and not bother me anymore?" I felt like she referred to obsessing spirits who were there, not the girls. When she said, "Wouldn't it be nice if there were truly angels who could come and stay with me?" I told her that there were, and I could see them. She remarked that sometimes she could see them too. After I had treated her some more, she said that she felt much better, and then again went off to sleep. I was sure she could be entirely healed if she could just be taken home. A few months later, September 20th, yesterday, Susie's father brought her home from Fergus Falls Asylum. She is much better, and the doctor asked that she be taken home on a trial. She recognized all the family and also photographs of old friends. She played on the piano. She remembered me and knew I was the one who had treated her side. That evening, I treated her again. She was plainly obsessed and told me a story in a very strange voice and manner. And she told of her great sorrow over some man who had committed a terrible crime and married several wives. She said she lived in a large house. And as she spoke, I had a sharp vision of a convent. She said her house was in France. I spoke sternly to this possessing spirit, but kindly too, and told the possessing spirit about how to go on her own progression. She left Susie. September 21st. This evening, Susie appeared to be still a different girl. an American from the country. The possessing spirit, this girl said she had been given a good Christian guide when she died, but that she was afraid to follow him for fear she would be lonely in heaven. And now she did not know how to leave. And so she was staying in Susie. It was now apparent to Susie's mother that she was obsessed or possessed. On September 26th, the notes say, "Today I treated Susie. This week she made a cake and set and cleared the table, also shampooed her own hair and brushed her teeth. She talks and acts much more normally, and her mother thinks her improvement is wonderful." October 3rd, Susie is steadily improving, now does embroidery and other fancy work. And Susie continued to improve. When last I heard of her, she was living a normal life, although the lost years had definitely delayed her development, and she probably never became the mature person she might have been. However, she brought much joy to her father and mother and was a useful, happy person. Other mental cases have been brought to me, but Susie's stand out in my mind because she was the first one, and I also have a diary record of the progress that she made. More cases of insanity than most doctors ever dream are caused by possession. It seems odd to me that the medical profession will go to such lengths to try to explain the 2 to 5 distinct personalities which operate in some of the patients whose histories have been meticulously recorded. The explanations always break down someplace. But of course, if the fundamental premise is denied that personality exists after death, the hypothesis of possession folds up. We need to know just what imbalance predisposes one to possession. I think endocrinology would be where the physical medicine could overlap with the psychic, because the psychic centers of the bodies are closely allied to the endocrine centers. I've seen some cases of mental derangement, in which case the cause was pressure at the base of the spine or on some portion of the head. Sometimes I sense the location of the abnormality. Other times I do not know the cause, and I have to trust the healing vibrations coming through my hands and to the power of earnest prayer, which often reaches the mind of the sufferer directly. I believe this works by lifting the longing of both the patient and the healer to the source of all health. Sometimes teachers or helpers appear to aid me, but I never call for them. I do not even call for my Father's help. I pray to God, and I know that He will send such help as is necessary from whatever plane it needs to come. Sometimes I do not understand why my father or teacher does not come to help me at once to give me some practical advice when I seem to have reached an extremity. But in such cases, I always find later that I myself or someone else involved in the problem needed to work through our own difficulty. Need is always answered when selfish considerations are eliminated from the call. There is no more practical statement of the spiritual law in the Bible than "Ask and ye shall receive, seek and ye shall find." August 9th, 1910. Today I went to Mrs. Haggerty's to give lessons. Eleanor was suffering from extreme pain in her back, so that she fainted when the doctor came to examine her back. The injury was caused by carrying a very heavy satchel when she had come home due to an illness. She had been in bed for 3 weeks and is very thin and weak. The doctor says she'll have to be put in a cast. She was blind for a while, but now can see a little bit. At 3 o'clock, I gave her a treatment, and she slept until 5:45. This was the first good sleep she'd had in 3 weeks. On waking up, she was able to get up and walk over to the telephone and call me to say that she felt different all over. On August 10th, I gave Eleanor another treatment. She slept fine last night, and today she can bend down. On August 12th, Eleanor says that after a second treatment, she rode 20 miles without pain. Her eyes have stopped jerking, and she can see better. Occasionally, I think that if I were living over these years of healing, I would get the doctor's reports on patients and keep scientific case histories. But then again, I wonder what would be the use of all that recording. In later years, I have seldom kept a diary account of patients. A few doctors who know what goes on in my little office, have learned to trust my hunches, as they call them. Sometimes I've wished that I might aid some wise and understanding doctor. But if I were meant to work in that fashion, it would have been made plain to me long before now. I have ceased to long for more education because the book I need, or the explanation I need, or the help I need comes to me. There were many years in which I grieved deeply that I did not have the advantages of a university training as the other members of my family had. Then one day I had an experience of being instructed by a very tall yogi from the other side, who told me to grieve no longer. He said that if I had been absorbed in the intellectual pursuits, the channel of communication would not have developed sufficiently to be used. Now, I do not believe this fact need always hold true, but I think the general philosophy of the mechanism which colored the university thinking of my day would have given me such an entirely different working hypothesis for life, so much that I would have neglected my own experience and distrusted my own leading. Sometimes in a warmer atmosphere of faith and wisdom, it will be possible for an individual to have intellectual training without losing this particular kind of inner sensitivity. I know families now into which a child with healing power or psychic power could be safely born and educated. One day in 1913, I received a call to come to Albert Lea, Minnesota, to treat 4 persons who were very ill. When I got there, many cases came from the surrounding countryside, so my day was very full. A neighbor child, a 7-year-old girl named Dorothy, who had been crippled from babyhood, came into the house where I was staying and sat on the floor in the corner of the room all day, watching me work. She had been in a cast for months, but now was able to walk using crutches. This was as much help as the doctors expected to be able to give her. She was a winsome child. That evening, she begged to have treatments, but her mother had no faith in that sort of thing. However, on my second trip to Albert Lea, the mother let me treat Dorothy. As with many children, I could feel her response. It is a good deal, the kind of feeling one has when praying for certain particularly selfless individuals, as if both the patient and I were lifted on wings. After the first treatment, Dorothy put aside her crutches and walked alone. After the second treatment, the lump on her spine disappeared. She also had a lump on her side, but after 3 treatments that were given that spring and late the following fall, even that lump disappeared. About 5 years later, I happened to be in town, and as I was walking down the street, I heard my name called. It proved to be Dorothy's mother. She wanted me to see Dorothy. The child undressed to let me see her spine, which was now straight. She was in perfect health and never missed a day of school. According to my diary, the healing force was very strong during those trips. I do not know why the force comes more strongly in some places than others, although I have a possible explanation. Faith combined with need sets up kind of current or receiving station, so that a locality in which live several persons of deep faith is bound to be more conducive to healing. At any rate, at that time in Albert Lea was an easy place for me to treat. On that first trip, 27 patients were treated, 49 in the second trip. The results were all remarkable. I recall my own amazement in being able to diagnose so accurately. On the trip of April 1st, 75 people were treated and many were turned away. The helpers were particularly active and noticeable at that time. I could feel them directing and regulating the healing current. I myself am never more than the channel through which flows from God himself, who is wholeness. Claudina came to me in Albert Lea, and we became lasting friends. She had been blind since infancy, and her life had been spent caring for children, washing dishes, and doing housework with little appreciation. She came to me in 1916 and stayed for 3 years. During that time, we had a large family. My son, Henry, and his wife, Eugene and his wife, and my daughter, Lillian, that was my grandmother, and Harry's son, Claudia. Then Claudina was living there, and also Alma, their maid. During the vacations, Harrie's sister Bertha and sister Cora and her husband and 3 children also came to their house. And we had a great deal of company. Minneapolis is a beautiful and hospitable city. Moreover, things were always interesting around our house. Claudina went to classes and learned to do fancy crocheting and knitting, rug making, basket work, and caning chairs. She could also tell colors using some of her inner sight. I recall a milliner, that's a hat maker, astonished when Claudina, who you recall was blind, once said, "I like the tan hat best," when no one had mentioned colors. Claudina married very happily. She is a capable, fine person and one of life's many blessings. Once I took a train on the 4th of July to go to Albert Lea, Minnesota, to see Claudina and her mother, who was a wonderful woman. I've forgotten the year, but I really recall that day. The train was so crowded in St. Paul that a woman took the last seat beside me. She had a very bad sore on her hand, and the bandage kept slipping off. The sight of the wound made me feel ill. I turned toward the window and tried to avoid conversation. After an hour's ride, I heard a voice say, "Don't turn away from it, heal it." I answered mentally, "Well, make her speak to me, and then I'll do what I can." Within 5 minutes, the woman next to me said to me, "Oh, I have such a hard time keeping this bandage on." She was very tall and blonde and seemed particularly pathetic. She told me she was a practical nurse, but because of this trouble, she was unable to do nursing and was in really bad despair. The doctor had told her the trouble was malignant. I held my hand over hers, not touching the sore, and I told her about healing, praying, and silently that she would be healed. As I was about to leave the train, she asked my name, and I gave her one of my little blue calling cards. After that day, I thought of her from time to time. Several years later, a young woman of dark complex came up to me and said, "You did so much for my mother that she has written me to come to see you before I go to the hospital. I was supposed to have gone in this morning, but I got her letter, so I've come here first." And then she told me of her mother's name, but I'd never heard it. I thought she was mistaken about my having done anything for her mother. But for the blue card, treasured by them all these years, she proved she was right. She explained further, "You treated my mother for cancer of the hand while she was on the train, and on the 3rd day, the whole growth just dropped off. It was gone." There have been a few occasions when I seem to have gone off on healing errands while I was asleep. That is, that's what some people call the astral body when it went about its business. One morning, a patient whom I had treated only once called me on the phone. "Well, if you didn't gad about at night, I could have come today for another treatment." The woman had suffered for a long time with trouble with her back and was often unable to sleep more than short stretches because of the pain. This night, she had seen me standing beside her bed. I was wearing a light blue dress with large white polka dots. I own such a dress. And she said that I told her I would fix her back. She wakened her husband, who also saw me. He looked at the clock and said it was 1 o'clock. In the morning, she was completely healed and was very happy. I never saw her again.